Hi, this is Daniel DiTuro. For decades, the media has reported that the U.S. and other countries are becoming more conservative. In this video, I'll share the definitions of conservative versus liberal ideology, and what do conservatives conserve? The dictionary defines conservative as a person having traditional values and averse to change or innovation. The political definition is favoring free enterprise, private ownership, and social traditions. It's obvious most conservatives do not oppose innovation and change. They prefer indoor plumbing to outhouses, cars and trucks over the horse and wagon, computers and tablets over pencil and paper, portable smartphones over traditional landline telephones, and flying in jet aircraft instead of propeller-driven aircraft. Billions of conservatives communicate by email, text, tweets, and social media. Many conservatives do cling to social traditions, like the lower classes working dangerous jobs for low wages. Like technology, social traditions, beliefs, and principles change over time. Many countries have so-called conservative and liberal ideologies. Regardless of political affiliation, everyone has basic needs, like a good-paying job, safe food, water and working conditions, affordable housing and health care, public safety, the right to privacy, and an unbiased judicial system. Today, many conservative politicians place corporate rights and their political careers above individual rights. In public, these politicians promise to protect individual rights, liberties, and freedoms. When elected, most protect the rights of their corporate sponsors. Prior to the Second World War, about 80% of Americans were highly independent rural farmers and ranchers. Urban workers, native and immigrant, worked 10-hour days, 6 days a week, for low wages and no benefits. A shrewd business owner made millions, while workers barely made enough to feed and clothe themselves and their families. Conservatives emphasizing family values saw nothing wrong with a father working 60 or more hours a week, or working multiple jobs just to make ends meet. Uneducated wives were second-class citizens responsible for the home and children. Ironically, most Americans take for granted liberal policies that reduced worker exploitation. These policies have been in effect for less than 100 years and are under constant attack by conservative politicians. Most conservatives on Social Security and Medicare oppose cutting these liberal socialist programs, and yet they elect and re-elect conservative politicians dedicated to cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits. Unlike liberal programs, the Conservative Health Maintenance Organization Act of 1973 did not reduce health care costs as promised. Instead, it turned highly profitable private health care into an even more profitable corporate wealth care. The conservative Medicare Part D prescription drug law gave drug companies carte blanche to set drug prices. Instead of saving consumers money, these laws created some of the wealthiest people in America. Doctors practice conservative medicine, meaning more office visits, tests, specialist referrals, and profits. With corporate medicine, you're more likely to be seen by a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant than a doctor. So what do conservatives conserve? Based on my observations, U.S. conservatism has little to do with frugality and traditional values, and more to do with private ownership, greed, and preserving wealth and power. Conservatives strongly believe in little or no taxes, especially corporate taxes. After decades of conservative tax cuts and trickle-down economics, millions of Americans have little or no savings. Low taxes reduces funding for public safety, like police, firefighters, and EMTs. Conservative politicians have been defunding the police for decades by cutting budgets and leaving positions unfilled. Most conservative politicians insist U.S. air quality is too clean, and that businesses can dump more toxins into the air with no ill effects. Eliminating air pollution control laws stimulates growth, creating thousands of jobs. After all, pollution equals progress. Conservatives define congested streets and highways as a sign of economic prosperity. The next time you're sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic, you should be grateful for economic prosperity. Even with today's clean air pollution causes thousands of deaths and costs billions of dollars in medical expenses and lost productivity. Ignore the fact asthma rates are increasing, and asthma alone causes over 3,000 deaths a year. Conservative politicians also insist there's no need for government interference with the U.S.'s safe drinking water. And yet, Americans spend about $20 billion a year on bottled drinking water. The U.S.'s safe drinking water causes over 7 million illnesses a year, 600,000 emergency department visits, 118,000 hospitalizations, over 6,000 deaths, and over $3 billion in healthcare costs. Contaminated water is responsible for most plant food-borne infectious organisms. Conservative politicians agree with food producers that the safest food supply chain in the world should be deregulated. That safe food supply chain causes over 48 million illnesses and 3,000 deaths. Here are a few examples of safe, wholesome U.S. foods. This potato is supposed to meet or exceed U.S. #1 grade. Frozen potatoes and potato chips now come with blemishes that used to be rejected. Here's an example of premium quality cashews. Over 12,000 deaths a year are caused by the U.S.'s clean air, water, and food. Conservative politicians also agree with food makers that Americans have the right to eat themselves to death, and that government has no right warning people about junk foods that can cause serious illnesses, or the risks of poorly tested synthetic chemical additives in prepared foods. Instead, conservatives support the $30 billion a year dietary supplement industry. Conservative emphasis on consumption has resulted in one of the lowest savings rates in the world. For people who do not have cash, there is plenty of easy credit. U.S. consumer debt is almost $16 trillion. While conservatives bemoan the federal government's debt, they encourage Americans to spend money they do not have and defend short-term consumer loans with loan shark interest rates. Without liberal Social Security, an estimated 30 million elderly Americans would live in poverty. Instead of educating people how to live within their means and save for retirement, Americans are encouraged to borrow and spend. Seniors unprepared for retirement can sell their life insurance policy to pay basic living expenses until that money runs out. Since most Americans can only live better buying cheap foreign-made products, corporations profit by outsourcing manufacturing jobs to low-wage countries. Conservatives embrace and encourage technology replacing human workers. American workers not only start with fewer benefits like vacation days. In 2019, they forfeited 768 million vacation days. Unlike countries that actually place family above work, the U.S. conservative work ethic places work above family. The U.S. is also unique for having no national holidays. Instead, there are state and federal holidays for state and federal workers. Holidays in the U.S. is all about consumption, not family. Americans are encouraged to spend money they do not have. While conservative politicians say they support free enterprise and competition in public, privately they do not interfere with corporate mergers that reduce competition and jobs. The conservative mantra for free enterprise means businesses are free to do whatever they want without government interference. After all, private ownership creates millionaires and billionaires, not government agencies. A low-cost public education system lifted millions of Americans out of poverty. And yet today, about 40% of Americans have a high school education or less. Teaching was once considered a profession. Today, a person with a master's of business administration makes 2 to 3 times the starting salary of a teacher with a master's degree. Reduced education funding has created teacher shortages by forcing teachers to pursue higher-paying jobs. Like corporate medicine, conservatives are creating corporate education. Many countries offer an affordable public education up to the college level. Like healthcare, the United States has the highest annual public college tuition. Instead of an affordable college education, about 45 million Americans owe over $1.6 trillion in student loan debt. Anyone mentioning an affordable or free college education is condemned as a liberal socialist. After all, student debt is a highly profitable business. Conservative politicians claim they are eliminating wasteful liberal deficit spending. And yet, when the Postal Service proposed eliminating Saturday mail delivery to reduce their operating deficit, conservative politicians blocked the change because it would deprive millions of lonely, elderly Americans the joy of receiving Saturday mail. Instead, U.S. taxpayer dollars subsidize Saturday mail delivery for lonely, elderly Americans. Ignore the fact millions of elderly Americans no longer rely on first-class mail. For years, it cost more than 1 cent to mint U.S. pennies. The current cost is about 2 cents per coin. While other countries have eliminated 1-cent coins and round monetary transactions to the nearest 5 cents, conservatives defend minting 1-cent coins. $150 million a year in taxpayer money is used to mint $75 million worth of pennies. The U.S. prints over 2 billion $1 bills a year. The cost is about 6 cents per bill with a useful life of 1.5 years. A $1 coin costs about 10 cents and has a life of 30 or more years. About $100 million a year is wasted printing $1 bills. In the 1970s, a conservative U.S. Congress killed converting to the metric system to save golfers and football fans the trauma of using meters instead of yards. They also believed converting to metric, used by 95% of the world's population, was a costly burden for businesses and consumers. Thanks to free market conservative lawmakers, U.S. retailers can use metric units in their product listings. The takeaway is that U.S. political conservatism has more to do with business rights than individual rights. Please leave a comment if you have any questions about this video. Thank you for watching.